Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I am Jason Romano. This is Sports Spectrum and the Sports Spectrum podcast. And today we are presented by Ronald Blue Trust. Check them out at ronblue.com for all your financial needs. This is a crazy, weird time that we're living in, and Ronald Blue Trust is the perfect place to turn to have all of your financial questions answered. Check them out at ronblue.com. Paul Tesori is our guest today here on Sports Spectrum. Excited to have you hear our conversation with Paul. He's a great guy. He's got a powerful story of faith, and I can't wait for you to hear about his journey because he was in a very broken place in his life back in 2010, basically lost everything from a worldly perspective, and God got a hold of him and really redeemed him in a powerful way, putting some people in his life that helped keep him accountable and helped grow him in his journey with Jesus. And one of those people was Webb Simpson, who is where Paul caddies to. One of those guys was Webb Simpson, the golfer, who Paul Tesori is the caddy for. And Webb, of course, you know Webb, 2012 U.S. Open champion, 2018 PGA Tour Players champion, 6 total PGA Tour wins for Webb Simpson that Paul has been a part of, including 2020 when they won the Waste Management Phoenix Open before the pandemic hit. And here we are, and it's almost summer, and Paul is going to talk a little bit about how he's been coping with COVID-19 and the quarantine time, and the fact that the PGA Tour is going to resume play, at least according to this recording, on June 11th through the 14th at the Charles Schwab Challenge. And Paul talks a little bit about getting excited for that as well. So take a listen to our conversation with Paul Tesori, PGA Tour golf caddy to Webb Simpson, and he joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. Paul, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Yeah, Jace, thanks for having me on, buddy. It's always fun to talk golf, and it's my love and my profession, so let's do it.
Absolutely. And before we get to that, or I guess it'll kind of blend into golf, really, is the pause that we've all had to take these last few months with the coronavirus. What's this time been like for you?
Man, it's hard to describe, really. I know everyone's had kind of their own situations, your own experiences, but it's been really, really strange. At the very beginning, obviously it was terrible. Just the thought of, what was going on. And, for us selfishly in our profession, we had played the first round of the Players. We were in 7th place. Webb was, playing the best golf of his life during that little stretch. And then, all of a sudden you get the text at 10 o'clock at night that tournament's canceled, and you have all these questions like, really? Like, we definitely could have played and all that. But then as day by day started progressing, you realized the grand scheme of what was going on here, and obviously the brutality of this pandemic and what it's done and the people it's killed. And obviously I don't think the world will ever be the same. So as it's gone forward after that, it's just been a lot of like really special family time. I like to tell everybody it's been about 85% incredible time that, you've never had before. And then there's that 15% where your wife needs you to go away for a little while. Yeah. We've been fortunate here in Florida that the golf courses are open, and she was kind of the first one to say, baby, I need you to go play golf a couple days this week. And I knew what that meant. And so I did. And that's actually made things a little bit more normal. And we've had 3 people in the household that are high risk. So we've had to make sure that we've kept our social distancing really strong and stayed quarantined.
Is that hard for you in your nature as a person? I mean, you're a golf caddy, and certainly you and Webb are close, but you're around a lot of people a lot. Is that hard for you, or was this time hard for you to kind of not be around a lot of people?
So I thought it was going to be easy, to be honest with you. I kind of like when I'm off the road and I get home, I like to kind of seclude myself a little bit. Again, play golf a couple of days a week, but after that, just kind of relax, do a couple projects around the house, whatever that might be, fish, boat, whatever that is. But that actually got really tiring very quickly. I think the first week I went fishing about every day, and then that finally got to be enough. So I was out of that and, did my projects around the house. That was done. And From that point, just a lot of board games with the little guy, a lot of puzzles that we've put together, some of them up to 3 times already that we've done the same puzzle. So at the beginning, I say yes. And I hear this about people that look forward to retirement, and they retire, and then, a month into retirement, they go back to work because they're like, well, this is not what it's made up to be. And I kind of feel like this is what that was. And, there's a lot of other things going on during this, a little bit of anxiety here and there, just about you don't want to get your family sick. You don't want to get anyone else sick. So I think that little bit of caution, no matter where I went, if it was to the gas pump, I'd have my gloves and mask on, and just trying to be ultra careful anytime I could.
What's the win in this, in the sense of the time, but even more from a spiritual perspective? I think a lot of us who are believers have been going to Romans 8:28, and it's like, all right, God works together the good for all of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And people are having a hard time finding good in this. Certainly the good is seeing people rally and come together and serve and help. But what's the good in this for Paul Tesori?
Yeah, I think for me, 2 things. Number one, faith-wise, it is definitely the most reading I have done in probably a decade. Just a lot of time to read scripture and to focus on some Bible studies every Monday and Tuesday. Me and Bubba Watson, Webb Simpson, Ted Scott, and kind of our, spiritual mentor, Brad Payne. We've done a Zoom call for an hour reading a book called Proverbs right now. And that's just been wonderful for our souls, and be able to talk to each other and just kind of share like the goods and the bads of what's going on. And then the next part is this: I so often put time ahead of what's best for my family. And during this, putting electronics away, putting everything aside, and just playing a game of Yahtzee, or sitting aside and finding time to sit down and just do a puzzle together as a family, making dinner together as a family where, not everybody's working or not somebody's coming home at the same time. So I think for me, it's not only just trying to find time to be creative with the family, just the family, spending time together, but also this has been forced upon us and shown me the value of that. I've just watched my kids just at the very beginning, everybody's like, oh boy, but now like they look forward to it each and every day. And I'm starting to as well. So I think it's just the reminder of how special one-on-one time, intentional time is with our family, and in particular our kids.
Is there things that you've done during this time that you say to yourself, I want to keep this going even when I can have the opportunity to go back to whatever that normal is once we get back and going, even as far as going back on the golf course and the events starting to take place? Is there something that happened during this time that you were like, I want to keep this going here? Because I feel like for me, there are things like even just Zoom calls and being able to connect closer to my family and to my friends that maybe I wasn't being as intentional about before all of this. I want to keep that going.
I love that. So that's definitely one for me right out of the gate. When I'm on the road, I don't like FaceTime. I wish I could just block myself and look at my wife and my kid, but having my little stupid picture over in the corner, I just despise. Well, with Zoom, you can do that. So I'm going to fall in love with that a little bit more, and just make sure my son's seeing my face every day. When we do head back to work on I think I fly out June 8th. We're going to be gone 3 straight weeks, and I want to make sure that still staying connected. So that's definitely one. And then my other one for me, that I read this book a little while ago called Tech-Wise Family. And it's just about the fact that technology is a gift, but so often, I would say 99% of the times, we don't use it as a gift. We use it more to damage us in what we're trying to do. And so I think that's going to be my big one, at least when I'm here at the house, is just putting everything away. Hey, 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night. No one's got a phone. No one's got a computer. No one's got anything. We're going to sit. We're going to talk. We're going to play. We're going to run. We're going to jump. We're going to fish. Whatever it's going to be, we're going to do that, and we're going to do it together as a family. And too often, time gets in the way. Well, I need to make dinner. Here, just take the iPad. Or, hey, I need to get dinner. You go talk to your friends on your phone and then come back in 30 minutes. No, let's do this together. And kind of make sure that, those days that we cherish those for what they are.
You said, you got to be out of there in early June and get kind of back to getting on the tour. How juiced up are you about that? You got to be pretty excited.
Yeah, 2 reasons. Number one, it's amazing how quickly that bank account goes away.
I understand.
When you're not working for the human ATM machine, Webb Simpson, a couple times a month, that bank account goes away quickly. So selfishly, financially, yes, very excited to get back to work. And then second of all, I'm just really ready to get back. We're created to work, and we are created to use the platform that we've been given, obviously, to share, our faith and those things. I'm just excited to get back to that aspect of it, to the community aspect of it, and obviously the competition part. It's time, and it's time for us to quit sitting around. It's time for all the games, and it's just time to get back to work, and really looking forward to that happening sooner rather than later. So I hope that we are able to do it on that second week of June in Colonial out in Fort Worth.
We'll get back to our conversation with Paul Tesori in just a little bit, but want to tell you about our friends again at Ronald Blue Trust. Check them out at ronblue.com. They are all about providing financial expertise, applying biblical wisdom, technical expertise, helping their clients make wise financial decisions, experiencing clarity and confidence, leaving a lasting legacy. They help families on all stages, families, individuals across the U.S., and especially focused on people beyond the debt problem stage, but they want to be good stewards of their health. And with COVID-19 and the pandemic, here, I think this is a great place and a great time for us to do a little bit of a reevaluation of our finances. Maybe a lot of us have done that. And Ronald Blue Trust is a great place to go to and ask those questions that you're not sure about, what to do from a financial perspective. So check them out at ronblue.com and see if they can help you in your financial needs. ronblue.com. Let's get back to our conversation now with Paul Tesori, PGA Tour golf caddy to Webb Simpson, joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Paul, tell me about the relationship you have with Webb Simpson, especially, I think, the parallels there of being a caddy, but also being a brother in Christ and a friend and someone that you can stay accountable with and do life with, and not just have this person be someone that you work with in the golf world, but be somebody that you can do life with.
First of all, I have an incredible job because of the man that I work for. I have given this exact statement many, many times, but, Webb is not only my boss, and he's not only 13 years younger than I am, but I look up to him in every area of life, which just shows, we read scripturally that wisdom is based on, your faith, your devotion to the Lord. That's where wisdom comes from. It's just trusting the Lord's words and the good book and the fact that it's an inerrant word of God. And if you follow the principles of the Bible and you do it in each area of your life, you're going to appear to be extremely wise. And that's what Webb and his wife Dowd does. They do it so well. They've got 5 kids, 9 and under. And I want to be the dad Webb is, the husband Webb is, the friend he is, the disciple, the saint that he is. I want to have the work ethic that he does. There's each area of his life he just pays very special attention to. And so he's a guy, a lot of people, laugh. When I first started working for him, he was 213th in the world. And at the end of that year, he was top 10 in the world. And he gave me a lot of credit for everything. And people would say, man, how does it feel? I was like, it feels great. I just wish I could tell everybody the impact he's had on my life and my faith. I was baptized in 2010 in the summer. And at the end of that year, I just assumed after you're baptized, everything was just going to be great, that, money was going to come flying from trees, that my relationships were going to just, fly to the moon, and that, everything was going to fall into place. Well, 5 months later, the real estate crisis had crashed. I lost every dime I had ever made. I was homeless at the time. I had a roof over my head, but it was so underwater that any day it could be taken from us. My relationship with my now wife had disintegrated, and we were apart. And I was fired for the first time in my life. A good friend of mine, Sean O'Hara, was working for him. We were top 20 in the world, doing great. And something just told him he needed to make a change. And so I remember in December of that year, I had lost everything worldly that I had. And I was the most at peace I had ever been in my entire life. And it was the first time I realized how just the falseness of this world and the promises that it gives you, that if you can just get this, you're going to feel this. It's a lie. It was the biggest example. And In December of that year, I had a choice between 2 top 10 players in the world or this guy at 213, named Webb Simpson, who no one had heard of at the time. He had been out there for 2 years and had struggled. And I don't know why, just through prayer, but I chose Webb. And he has changed my life drastically in my faith. And obviously, I think I've been able to help him achieve some of the goals he wanted to achieve in golf.
Man, that's a great story, Paul. But where's that faith for you before 2010? You said you were baptized in 2010. That doesn't mean you weren't a Christian necessarily, but where's that faith take shape?
Yeah. It's one of those hard balances. I don't know if I was a believer or not. I say no. There's a lot wiser people that think that I was a believer, but just, my maturity level was like a baby when it comes to it. I don't think I was a believer, and I really would have argued with somebody on that. I would talk about Jesus. I went to church. I tithed. I prayed. I did not read. My knowledge of the Bible was extremely low. I was married once before. I had lost that marriage through a series of bad decisions, through working way too much and then eventually having an affair. It was the lowest of the low for me. But at that time, when I went through those things, I thought it could never happen to me. I thought an affair could never happen. This was 2003. I thought that, being a workaholic could never happen to me. And then fast forward 5 years later, 6 years later, 2009 up until 2010, I was going through the exact same issues, struggling with lust, struggling with, the need for things, the need for materialistic things, this never ending feeling inside of a lack of peace. Like, what am I missing? I've achieved everything in my career that I could have imagined. I've got all this money. I've got these titles. I've got this respect. I've got this, beautiful daughter. Why do I feel the way I felt? And it wasn't until, for me, I took that step of being baptized. And we all know you don't have to be baptized to be saved.
Right.
It's just an act of obedience is all that is. But for me, it was a very, very close transition there. The act of being baptized for me, that act of obedience, it's one of those things, it doesn't matter which side of the fence that, if you're believer baptism or you believe more, in kind of the Old Testament view of baptism. But for me, anything that Jesus thought he needed to do, then I want to do the same. And, Jesus was baptized in the River Jordan. He wanted to do it. I wanted to do it. And I definitely came out of that a different man. And later on, also a marked man. I think there's a big bullseye on your back when you come out of that water. And the enemy is kind of like, okay, let me go get him. Let's see how strong his power is. But a long story short, back to your question, I actually believe if I would have been taken from this earth at that time, I don't believe I was going to go to heaven. And I would have, it's a scary place to be. I think, biblically it's warned that being lukewarm is a scary place to be, that you'd rather be cold or hot.
Yes.
And I think I was in a lukewarm place. I think I had a false feeling of my eternity with Jesus in heaven. And, I don't know, looking back on it now, I try to share, my path with as many people that'll listen, because it's scary for me to think of that the Lord would have taken me back then, that I don't believe I would have been able to experience that glory in heaven with him.
Paul Tesori is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, golf caddy to Webb Simpson. So as you and Webb start working together, you've talked about how you look up to him. I think that's so interesting, being that he's younger than you, not much younger, but 13 years is a pretty big gap there. But yet he can be a guy in many ways that's, you're Paul and you're the Timothy, if you look in the Bible and the way Paul and Timothy are. That's really an interesting dynamic. Can you kind of share a little bit about growing into a maturity where you're willing to learn from someone younger? For a lot of people in any business world, especially in the world of sports, someone younger, you're kind of like thinking, maybe I know everything because you're younger than me. Don't tell me what you know. It takes some maturity there. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I would definitely go to maturity, because when I started learning from Webb, when again, at the time I would have been, 10 years ago, I'd have been 38 and he would have been 25. Yeah. I think it was more of an issue of the Lord had taught me so much humility through my life through the immense amount of mistakes I had made, that to just kind of really, he seeks out the proud and opposes the humble. That's a strong statement. Sometimes we just run through those words, that he seeks out the proud, that the Lord, seeks out the humble, that the Lord is looking for the humble, and seeks them out, where he opposes the proud. And I think so often, especially as men, I think this issue of pride jumps in. And so by the time I went to work for Weber, I was pretty much stripped of that, taking this massive chance on this young guy who was struggling at the time. And I just started realizing very quickly how different Webb was, how different. I used to mock the way he talked to his wife. Hey, baby, how you doing? And I'm like, that's terrible. You're not a man. Men don't speak like that. What are you doing? And he would laugh. And then there I was 2 years later speaking the same way to my wife in a kind, sweet manner, and letting her know how thankful I am for her. And it's just the way he walked that was just so completely different than anything I had seen. And also, just learning the Bible, walking through it. I remember, the first time I went through the story of the prodigal son, which any mature believer knows the story. It's not really about the older son. It's about the lost son, but then it goes back to the older son and the pride that he had. And he was more of the Pharisees in the story that Jesus was telling. Well, I always read that story and I'm like, yeah. I'd be angry too. I was the older son. Like, I'm mad. He left and he spent all your money and he comes back and you're going to, put out this beautiful spread, kill the most beautiful calf and, have this great dinner and celebration where this older son had been sitting back. And I remember sharing that story with Webb, and Webb just laughed. He goes, Paulie, that's the point of the story, is that you're the older son. He's like, you believe that you deserve. And the fact is, we don't deserve anything. Everything the Lord gives us is through his grace and his mercy, that we all, deserve an eternity in hell, apart from God the Father. But because of what Jesus did on the cross, dying for us, that we are given this right. He sought us out. This isn't our choice. He sought us out and has delivered us into this. And so, to have somebody like that very quickly, and at the end of that, I'm like, oh, I get the story. That makes more sense to me now. And then, just as you're studying scripture and starting to walk through, to have somebody, I always thought there was a plan A and plan B. God didn't know that we were, that Adam and Eve were going to, break into this world of sin and, break the world forever and all this. There must have been a plan A and B. Like, no. There's no plan A and plan B. This was just, he's all knowing. And so, long story short, when you end up spending time with someone that is evident that they're smarter than you, which Webb, biblically, incredibly smarter than I was, that it's easy to look up to them. And so, again, back to your question was it hard, or how do you look up? I'm not going to point to maturity. I'm going to just point humility and trying to put myself, even now, in marriage, there's plenty of times where I think I'm right and I think she's wrong. And I just remember a great sermon by C.J. Mahaney, who said, just remember, in 100% of the cases, you have at least 1% of the sin, even if you can't see it. And so trying to step back sometimes in arguments, or times of strife, and remember, okay, hey, my sin's here somewhere. I can't see it. So just be soft right now until the Lord can kind of reveal your heart. And those areas all come from just Weber and his wife's obedience to the Lord, and just how beautiful that's been.
That's really good wisdom there, Paul. Let me ask you about faith on the tour. So as you have this sort of, I don't want to say newfound faith, but you've described it that way. And then, in 2012, you have, that experience that every golfer and caddy probably wants to have, where you win a major, the 2012 U.S. Open Championship. And we'll talk about, I think, that moment in a second, or maybe it plays into my question, but it's really about carrying your faith to the course. And what does that look like? Obviously, for you and Weber, I think there's a bond, but just faith maybe in the golf world, and staying disciplined and staying connected to Christ in a week where you're really trying to prepare to win a golf tournament. What's that look like?
Yeah. So faith, extremely important on the tour. All you're judged by on tour is what's your world ranking, what's your FedEx Cup ranking, what's your scoring average, what's your fourth round scoring average, what are you in putting, driving, where are you in the team event that year, the President's Cup or the Ryder Cup, and it's always, that's the way you're judged. And so the community of believers on tour has just been immense, and it's been beautiful. I started in 2000 caddying for Vijay. It's my 20th year now, and I've just seen the believers on tour grow, and it's been beautiful to see. A lot of young believers coming to the tour. I think some companies like College Golf Fellowship, who's based out of Dallas, I think, them going into colleges and just sharing the gospel with them. It's really led to this influx of young people who are believers coming on tour. And, we have Bible study every week on either Tuesday or Wednesday night. And I think that draws the guys close together too. And no matter what, Webb's 7th in the world right now. He's 5th in the Ryder Cup standings. He's 5th in FedEx Cup, but we know that all of that is fleeting. In 3 months, we might be completely struggling with our game again, without us even knowing. And that's where you need that community of believers that can kind of understand, can walk through that with you. Yeah. If there is something, maybe some sin that unrecognized sin, a blind spot that you have that can be pointed out. But I think also for us, in Isaiah, it's talked about, God said, go. Basically it's a Sermon on the Mount, which is go and make believers out of all nations. And I think for us, one of the things that we try to do is we try to share the gospel on tour. And, it's a tricky place to walk on because you don't want to force that into talks or communications. But sure, if you believe that if you walk a certain way, if you talk a certain way, if you behave a certain way, that people are going to notice there's something different about you. And then when they ask, you can just say, hey, I couldn't do this on my own. I'm able to do this just because of the good news of Jesus Christ and what he's done for me. And that's it. And it just opens up opportunities to share because of the way we walk. And we know that we're not capable of staying calm on the golf course when, we're 4 or 5 over par and life's not good. We're not. We just know that's the strength of the Lord that lives inside of us that's able for us to do that. So if we can share that to one person, to 2 people, and help guys understand that. Webb does a great job. He picks 3 to 5 young guys each year and has dinner with them and disciples them and just spends time with them and walks through the hardships on your first year on tour. And that's something that he wants to do. And me now being a veteran caddy, it's something I try to do as well. And I think anytime you can do that, make sure that the focus stays on your faith and not really on the results. That I think both will increase. Both the results and the faith can increase at the same time.
So that being said, what was that like 2012 winning that U.S. Open championship?
Yeah, cool, absolutely. Yeah, very cool. And an incredible way. I got a quick little story. As you can tell, I love talking golf. So this stuff is very easy for me to go through. But the Monday at the U.S. Open at the time was probably the worst I had seen Webb as far as being out of peace. He was frustrated. He was short with me, short with some volunteers, just not typical Webb Simpson. And I didn't know what was going on. So I talked to my wife that night and she goes, you need to talk to him. So Tuesday morning, we're on the putting green. I said, hey buddy, can I just have a minute of your time? He's like, yeah. And so I just kind of spilled all this on. I was like, have I done something to offend you? Very, very weird day yesterday. You seemed really, and right there on the putting green, 2012 U.S. Open and Olympic Club, he stopped, he leaned on his then long putter and he said, Paulie, he goes, I'm sorry. He goes, I missed my son's first steps yesterday and it wrecked me. It just wrecked me. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I want to be home. I want to be a dad. I want to be a husband. And I can't believe I missed it. And it's just wrecking me inside. And so we prayed on the spot. And then that night he went home and prayed. And, they decided to fly his wife Dowd out. And by the end of the week, it was just this beautiful little transformation that happened in a short amount of time. But it was one of the greatest weeks him and his wife Dowd have ever had together. A great story on the 71st hole. We're tied for the lead in the U.S. Open. And we've got this extremely difficult second shot in number 17 at the Olympic Club. And we're dead in between clubs, in between this 4-iron and 3-iron. And, both clubs make sense. They both have their own positives and negatives. And we're sitting there and we got this wait because we're waiting for the group in front of us to putt out. And he goes, Paul, what's great? And I'm like, okay, good. He's got an idea here of what we're missing. And he goes, what's great? I said, no, what's that? He goes, buddy, if we win the next 15 U.S. Opens and the next 15 money titles, it's all going to rot away and we're going to have eternity in heaven. And I just stood there and I laughed And I said, buddy, that's great and all that, but can we talk about this shot we have at hand and we'll worry about that afterwards? And it was a good moment for him and I to laugh, but also just look at the transformation from Monday to Sunday. Yeah. Monday, there was no pressure on him at all. There was zero stress that should have been on him, and he was not in a good place. But because of the fact that he had a community of believers around him, at that time it was his caddy, who could ask him a very intentional question, by the end of the day, when all the stress was on the line, every bit of it that could ever be brought upon you as a golfer was now upon him. And he just was in a very peaceful place. He was nervous, but in a peaceful place, and obviously led to winning the U.S. Open, and a story I'll never forget, obviously. And to be perfectly up front, I think it's something to me that I'm glad the struggle went on Monday, because it led to that beautiful story on Sunday.
Well, that's the redemption story of Christ, and right,
that's
the struggle.
That's it.
We got to go through the struggle in order to come out on the other side. That's beautiful
and
picture.
Isn't that so easy always afterwards to see?
Oh, of course, easy.
Sometimes
after.
in the midst of tribulation, it's harder to feel. But if we can trust in that, then I think, Webb had the yips for 2.5 years on the PGA Tour, and there was a lot of tears that were shed during that stretch. There was a lot of, wondering, would we ever figure this out during that stretch? There was all of these things that were going on.
That's awesome. I love that. Let me ask you 2 more questions, Paul, here. I want to make sure I get this in because I know it's important to you. You co-founded the Tesori Family Foundation with, I believe, your wife, Michelle. Can you tell us about that and the reason why you kind of, started that foundation and the heart behind it?
Yeah, so it was something I always wanted to do. I played golf at the University of Florida, and one thing that we did there was once a week we would go volunteer community service hours at a senior center, and I just ended up loving it. I had this wonderful lady there, Eileen, that I would go play Yahtzee with once a week, and I just remember how it was something I never wanted to do, and it felt like a stress to go. And every time I went, I got way more out of it than I feel like Eileen got. And so it was something I wanted to do. And my wife, way smarter than I am, was running nonprofits for a living at the time. And I remember in 2010, after I was baptized, I had a conversation with her about, the foundation. We had started one, but we weren't doing anything. She's like, baby, you keep saying that you don't want to do it till you can do it right. And she said, that's a cop-out. Just make a difference in one life, and then 2, and then go forward. So we started really pouring into it in 2010. And then 2014, my baby boy Isaiah was born. He's 6 years old now. He was born with an extra chromosome, trisomy 21, aka Down syndrome. Yep. And very quickly, it just gave us an avenue and a platform to use. And now we have something called the All-Star Kids Clinic, which we do in 20 cities throughout the PGA Tour schedule. Where we do 25 kids with special needs, and we introduce them to golf for the first time. We get one-on-one instruction with PGA Tour players, caddies, and teachers. We combine with the first tee of each site that we go to, and it's been beautiful. We're able to share a little bit of our faith and just what God has been just so kind to do to us, and we've been able to give back. And then probably my favorite, which it should be the All-Star Kids Clinic, but ours is Christmas Tree Angel, which we do in December. We buy gifts for 100 families, for the kids and adults, and we pick them out, we wrap them, and then we deliver them to the St. Augustine Homeless Coalition. And for us, it's turned into a beautiful thing that we do at a local place, Kohl's, and we have 50 volunteers that get together, and we drink coffee, we eat some donuts, we share the gospel, and we shop for those less fortunate at the same time. So you can get on and check out our website at TesoriFamilyFoundation.org. We have one of our biggest All-Star Kids clinics on Wednesday. So, prayers are obviously always encouraged. And if you want to reach out on the website, and we'll be sure to get back in touch with you.
That's great. Yeah, again, the website, TesoriFamilyFoundation.org. Paul, this has been great. Last question. We ask this to all of our guests here on the podcast. The last question I like to ask here on the show is, what is the Lord teaching you right now? What are you learning from God today, where he's brought you, where he has you? What's he been teaching you?
I'm going to do it's a double one. I'm going to say obedience, and through obedience, just again, humility. I feel like it's something that, I just want so much more of Jesus. And there are times where if you looked at my life, if you did an audit of Paul Tesori's life, it wouldn't look like that's the case. It would look like that I want more of social media than I want of Jesus. It would look like I want more of my own golf game than I want of Jesus. It would look like I want more of a show streaming on Netflix than I want of Jesus. And so obedience, and through that humility, it's just to humble myself before the Lord and say, Father, I am not following you the way I want to follow you right now. And, so many times people think that following the Lord, takes a massive amount of commitment. It doesn't. It's just that if you believe that he's your Lord and Savior and he's the Son of God, why would you not want to spend more time in prayer, more time in meditating on the Word, more time in reading, the great Word? And so for me, that would be it. If someone did an audit of my life, I think they would call me out for being a hypocrite. And the last thing I want to do is fall into that kind of Pharisees in the way that would look, the Pharisaical approach, which just means if I look good, I can speak Christianese with the best of them, but I want to make sure my heart has been transformed and is relying on the Lord every day.
This has been a fantastic conversation, Paul Tesori. Thank you so much for being here on Sports Spectrum. Really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully we can do it again.
Jason, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed it and hope to talk to you again soon.
Great stuff there from Paul Tesori. Really appreciate him joining us on Sports Spectrum. Check out his Twitter page at Paul Tesori. It's Tesori. And then check out the Family Foundation website, TesoriFamilyFoundation.org. TesoriFamilyFoundation.org, that he co-founded with his wife, Michelle, doing great work. And it's what it's all about, giving back. And that Family Foundation is doing a lot of great things for other people. So thanks to Paul, thanks to Michelle, and thanks to Paul for joining us here on the show today. We also want to thank our sponsors, Ronald Blue Trust. Check them out at ronblue.com for all your financial needs, ronblue.com. And thank you for tuning in. Check out our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the home base for all of our content, sportspectrum.com. You have a daily devotional every day, 6 a.m. Eastern, available for you. You have articles all day long on the intersection of sports and faith. Every single podcast is right there on demand, available to listen to. Over 500 episodes of the Sports Spectrum podcast can be found at sportspectrum.com. And of course, they can be found everywhere podcasts are found. Whatever podcast app you're listening to this interview on, thank you. We really do appreciate you tuning in and sharing all that we're doing here at Sports Spectrum. All the best to you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. This is the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.